Welcome back to the Bangla Folk podcast, the podcast which looks at exploring the heritage of Bangladeshi arts and their connection to communities within the UK and Bangladesh. We are a collective, each with a different perspective, but with a mutual interest in defining what folk art is within the diverse communities that we currently are a part of. Through these podcasts and working with Lancashire Encounter, we will delve deeper into different forms of folk art as a free-form creativity. Now, as you know, we explore what is folk art within these podcasts, and I'm really excited today because we're exploring what folk art is as a form of drag. And joined with me today is the lovely Planet Parle. Whoa, how's it going, man?
Yes, it's going really well. I'm so glad to be here. Can't wait to learn more and see where this conversation goes.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to speaking to you. So for those of you that don't know, Planet Parle is a YouTuber, a stage performer. He is well known for his iconic character Kokila. And yeah, I think I honestly had Papri Bano, Papi Bano stuck in my head for a good month. So yeah, welcome.
Thank you so much. Gujarati pronunciation.
Thank you, man. Thank you. And of course, joining me also is the lovely Choriza May, who is our Newcastle queen, originally from Valencia, Spain, and of Spanish heritage, a part of RuPaul's Drag Race in season 3 of the UK, winner of Drag Idol, and of course, they also performed at Northern Pride as well. So welcome, Choriza May, as well.
Thank you so much. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Absolutely loving your setup. Look at that.
Thank you so much. Have to get the branding out. Every time.
I need tips. But no, that's looking absolutely fantastic. And last but not least, joining me as well is the lovely Joanie Crump, who basically put together Hartlepool's Folk Festival. Joanie, welcome as well. Thank you so much for making the time to be here.
Thanks so much. I'm really excited to chat about this. This is something I'm really interested in. I'm actually doing my master's dissertation about drag as a folk art. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, and in addition to doing with Hartlepool Folk Festival in 2019, which is the last one that we did, we actually had, as part of our cabaret, we had Choriza May and Velvet Snatch come and do part of the show, and I just absolutely think that there's such an obvious relationship between drag and folk. So
100%, and I'm so looking forward to delving into all the amazing research and reading that I'm sure you're doing as well, and getting a perspective of historically how that has evolved as well. In the early 1900s, dating back to even the 1800s in Bangladesh, there is a form of folk art which is called jatra, which is basically within villages, and kind of like your South Asian Bengali version of a pantomime, whereby you would have males, portraying female characters on stage, and vice versa, and it would be as well as drama, a song and dance as well. And the real interesting thing is that drag has evolved into this new age as a form of folk art as well. And what I wanted to start off by is just asking each of you respectively what drag means to you, and just how it has really been a form of expression for yourselves. So if I can start off with Parle, if that's all right.
Oh gosh, throw me in the deep end. It means so many different things, I suppose. Like yourself, I'm South Asian, I'm Gujarati, so of Indian heritage, and we have our own sort of drag folk format as well. It's known as bhavai, and it's the same sort of thing. So they're like small, sketchy sort of plays that sort of tour around the villages, sort of. And so it's really normal to see that sort of format travel around in India. Like you see it all the time, even when you're out there, you're like, oh, look, there's a bhavai going around, in the sense that, oh, there's a folk sort of play going around. And that's obviously inspired the industry out there. But for me personally, here in the West, being born and brought up in London, there wasn't that many South Asian men, I suppose, that were doing the whole, let's, you know, break that barrier and, you know, dress up as a female and play a role or entertain. So for me personally, like, I didn't even realize what I was doing. I just thought, oh, well, I'm just going to make some videos on the internet, being my mum, being, you know, Sweetie, one of my other famous characters on Planet Parle. So for me personally, it's sort of like breaking down a barrier, and also just a reminder that, you know, this sort of thing has been happening in our community for a long time. It's new in the sense to relative time, but it's not new in the sense that it's never been done before. There were contemporaries who have done it. But I suppose for me, like, I've always believed that a role is a role, in the sense that it shouldn't really slow you down if you're a man or a woman playing the opposite gender, or if you're playing no gender at all. That's another thing that I've always been interested in, like, what if the character just didn't have a gender? So I suppose, yeah, it means those things, probably a lot more, and you'll probably unravel my layers.
No, 100%. I definitely hear what you're saying, Parle. Like, within the South Asian community, it is really important to be able to break those barriers. And it is unusual within the UK to see South Asian men portraying those characters. Joanie, of course, as a master's student, you probably have a greater understanding of the history of drag within the UK. Like, what are your thoughts on where drag is today, and what does it mean to you?
I think personally, I've been working in folk for about 20 years. And but my history with drag goes back even further than that, because I think I went to my first drag show when I was about 15, and I have always loved it, but I've loved watching the evolution of drag now as a folk art, now, or as an art form in itself. I think that drag is one of the most interesting and evolving and fresh and exciting art forms that there is, really, anywhere, like, not just in the UK, like anywhere in the world. There's so much that you can do with it, because it's intrinsically transgressive. So a man in a dress on a stage is intrinsically transgressive. Particularly, I can remember some years ago hearing a quote saying that whenever, and I related to this very much, whenever a fat girl is on a stage and she's not the butt of the joke, then it's a political act. I think whenever a man is in a dress on a stage and he's not the butt of the joke, it's a political act. But the really interesting thing is that drag has evolved so much beyond that. So you get bio queens now. So you get women who are drag queens. You get women who are drag kings. You get people who are transgender doing all kinds of really interesting things. And I think that it is at the cutting edge in many respects of all the dialogue around gender and performative gender now in across the world. Really, it's a really important part of that conversation.
Yeah, 100%. And I think this is a great time to bring Choriza into the conversation, because Choriza, I saw a really great interview that you did for ITV, where you were talking about as a migrant from Spain, how you were really feeling as though you could not contribute to the dialogue around Brexit, and you know, you kind of had to watch from the sidelines as the situation unfolded. How has drag been a way for you to really kind of express your political views, and how have you kind of channeled that into your act?
Just two worlds came together really at once when I started doing drag. It was just the perfect timing for me. The whole Brexit situation was becoming really frustrating in my life. I didn't know what to do. As you said, I didn't feel part of the conversation. Like, the perspective of the EU immigrants was literally totally stripped away. Like, we were not allowed even to vote on the referendum. So for me, it just fell to a point that it was a bit pointless. I didn't feel like I could do anything about it. So I decided that I was not going to read about it. I didn't want to stress about it. But as an immigrant, and all my friends asking me every day, so what are you going to do? Are you going to have to leave? Are you going to have to stay? Do you need advice? And I was like, honestly, I just don't know. I don't want to know. I don't feel part of the conversation, so I'm going to block it. But it just got to a point that it was too much.
Yeah.
And it was also in a time when I was feeling a little bit creatively dry. I do work as a graphic designer, but my family, we are all artists. My cousin's a dancer, my brother is a musician. And I was like, well, I'm the most flamboyant homosexual in this family, and I'm the only one that is not an artist. We need to fix this real quick. So drag was drag was something that I had been wanted to do for a long time. So it started when the whole Brexit thing was kicking off, and very, very, very soon I realized that I could use drag as a political tool, and as a political tool, maybe to change minds and educate. We as drag queens and drag kings have such an amazing platforms at the moment, like all eyes are on us. And every time I was on stage, I felt it was my moment, and I had a responsibility really to let it all out. So that's what I started doing. One of my most well-known numbers, it's my Brexit number, and I performed it across the country. And it's really, really had a big impact, from people walking off the venues to people waiting on the end of the performance to come and thank me and tell me how if they could, they would vote differently when the referendum came around. So it's drag is a very, very, very powerful political tool at the moment. So
100%. And I feel like the fact that through your art form, that even if they are like people walking off, and you're invoking such a powerful emotion, like the fact that you can even do that through your art form is what makes drag so special, I think, within the 21st century. Because like Joanie was saying, like it does kind of transgress like these boundaries in a lot of different ways. For me, so my background is I'm British Bangladeshi, and I'm also Muslim. So when I portray female characters, the main kind of motivation is being able to kind of portray scenarios where I wouldn't be able to necessarily find an actor or like a Bengali auntie that is brave enough to put herself in front of the camera to do the dialogue that I'm wanting to do. And I feel like, you know, one of the beauties of drag is being able to have dialogue which you wouldn't necessarily sometimes have people in that position to be able to do. So for example, like within my community especially, I do feel like sometimes Bengali women of like maybe like 40 plus, like they do find it difficult to put themselves out there in acting roles. And that was one of my main motivations, being able to like portray those scenarios. But what's really interesting is kind of seeing the spectrum amongst the three of us. And Joanie, I would love to get your thoughts on this as well, because it's like with me, when I am portraying these characters, I'll still wear like my normal clothing, but I will just like maybe put on a wig, or I will you know, put on a headscarf. But then Parle takes it a step further, and you know, he puts the makeup on, he changes his clothing. I mean, like with Sweetie, like, you know, he's got like the pink lipstick on there. And then we've got you know, Choriza, who is just like an absolute like amazing act with so much glitz and glamour. So it's really interesting to see within the three of our communities how we all express that in different ways within like the 21st century. Joanie, like for you as well, like how have you kind of seen it develop within different communities, and where do you kind of see drag going as well? Like I would love to get your thoughts.
I mean, that's a really interesting question. Just to go back quickly to something that Choriza mentioned a minute ago when she was talking about, sorry, she, he, I'm not sure which pronouns you prefer.
You have to say she. If it's Choriza, you have to say she.
I always say she. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't mind. I love
Okay, so when Choriza came to our festival in 2019, one of the reasons I specifically wanted her to do that, to do the festival, is because Hartlepool was one of the highest Brexit voting constituencies in Britain,
Yeah,
and I'm very specific. I beg your pardon?
You put me on the spot. I didn't find out. I didn't find that out until the day I was performing.
Yeah, and I was like, you know, this is, I very deliberately wanted to do that. I wanted to put that Brexit show in front of, and I mean, I know that the folk audience isn't the same as like a local Hartlepool audience, because we do get people from all over the country that come to the festival. But I still felt like it was very important to put that event on in that space and time, you know, because it was like a response to what had happened. And also because I want people outside of our town to know that though this is what you hear about us all the time, this does not represent all of us by any stretch of the imagination, you know. And I'm an immigrant too, so you know, I completely relate to a lot of what's in that you know, what's in that show. And it was very interesting watching the folkies' response to it, really. I think that with regard to where drag is and where it's going, I mean, who knows where it's going? That's what's so exciting, is that, as I say, I think the drag is like one of the most dynamic art forms around. You know, so many other things look so stale and stagnant to me now in comparison, because drag can go anywhere, you know? I think we can't discount the RuPaul effect, because certainly how the last 10 years of RuPaul have transformed ordinary people's perception of drag, and also transformed drag queens, has really elevated, I think, a lot of what drag queens do and a lot of what they aspire to, made people a lot more ambitious, perhaps. But then it's really interesting, because a lot of the time things that break convention then end up being quite confining in and of themselves. And I think that that's kind of something that people have identified about RuPaul's Drag Race recently. You know, when she was kind of not really loving the idea of having trans queens, for example. And that's been a real conversation which has now changed. You know, we've gone from, you know, gentlemen, start your engines, may the best woman win, to may the best drag queen win, because you know, we have our first, what we call AFAB queen, assigned female at birth queen, in the new series 3 of Drag Race in the UK, the very first one anywhere in the world. And I think that tells you where drag is going. You know, anybody can do it. It's a means of expression and of, I think, very much about political commentary, you know, commenting, and political dialogue. But also, I think it's about people being able to explore their own identities in a really interesting way. You know, I mean, as a woman who is bisexual, I really find drag very empowering, because it allows me to explore femininity in a way that, I mean, you know, it's not like I'm a drag queen, but you know, when I've occasionally experimented with a bit of drag, it allows me to explore femininity in a way that I never have had the opportunity to before in my life. I'm sorry, that's just my daughter eating a bed behind me. Yeah, sorry, I'm in her flat in Glasgow right now. So yes, so that's where, yeah, that's where
I feel like it is really interesting being able to explore that femininity, because for me, as like just a guy, like I do find it difficult sometimes to, you know, be in tune with like what I'm feeling and really understanding like what I am feeling and stuff. Yeah. But it is like almost an art form that really does kind of like help you tap into that. And what's really interesting is what you said about like you know, like how how with all these like new kind of ways that it is evolving with RuPaul's Drag Race, because it did really kind of bring drag to the social space and like to these, you know, streaming platforms and stuff like that, where
completely mainstreamed drag, without a doubt, you know.
100%. And one thing that I wanted to ask Parle is, you know, with the South Asian kind of like drag scene, of course, when you were saying like it's not something that you saw a lot of South Asian men doing, but at the end of the day, like with you know, your show
Mrs. Kapoor's daughter's wedding,
Mrs. Kapoor's fat daughter's wedding, like that's been a sold out show like every single time you've done it, man. So you know, like how do you kind of see it existing within the South Asian space?
I think there's been this mega normalization that's happened maybe over the last decade, you could say, where it has become so normal now for men to dress up as women, women to dress up as men, people, you know, people are beginning to talk about this being normal. And I feel like it's not fully normal yet, but we're on that journey now. And we're talking about that journey. So I think one thing is, a lot of people didn't even recognize what I was doing as drag, because drag as a word is still really taboo in the South Asian community. I know that when I started, I never even understood what I was doing as drag, as I mentioned earlier. Whereas now I'm sort of like, no, drag is so much more than, you know, what we've understood it to be. And things like RuPaul's Drag Race have definitely helped. But I feel like even with that, it's just, again, the beginning, just like the tip of the iceberg to what's so much more. So I feel like people are definitely more open to it. And I have to say, like, I've not had any negativity or any bad feedback from any members of the audience. I've never had anyone be derogatory to me or be nasty to me for playing a female role. In fact, the opposite, what people have always appreciated is the transformation. So they're like, we literally cannot believe that you are, you know, Parle in your 20s from South London, playing this fabulous auntie with flawless makeup, which I do myself, which I love doing. I absolutely love doing the makeup. I remember when I got the show, they obviously like, you know, we'll get a makeup artist. And I'm like, I have a better idea. How about I just learn to do it? And it's been amazing. So I feel like, yeah, people are accepting it more. They're talking about it more. They're seeing it more. So, like Joe said, we don't know where it's going to go. Like we don't know what's going to happen next. It's really exciting. It's at this sort of kind of like this big fireworks stage where it's like opening up. More people are speaking about it, but we don't know how that dust is going to settle, if it's going to settle. So yeah, it's a really exciting time. I think for me personally, I really want to see more female to male roles being sort of accepted and on the stage and the rest of that. I don't like this idea that drag should just be about drag queens. We should have, you know, drag queens, drag rulers at the top, gender neutral drag. We should just, because it's about transformation really, for me personally, drag, like someone transforming who they are entirely and using the toolkits of what drag is to become someone else, to express what they want to express. So I feel like, I hope I get to see that. I hope I get to see a show like Mrs. Kapoor's Daughter's Wedding that's about, I don't know, Mr. Patel's son's wedding, something like that. So yeah, that's where I'm at with my personal journey with it all.
For sure. It's interesting, you know, you say like you haven't got like a backlash and any kind of negativity towards your shows and stuff, because it's been quite the opposite with me. Like although I have like a very kind of supportive audience where, you know, anytime I play like a Bengali auntie and stuff like that, because I come from a Muslim background, I do find that there is an outlash sometimes. And there was one time where I basically created a parody of the Pokemon theme song with bottle gourds. I don't know if you know what bottle gourds are, but it's a very like characteristic, like iconic thing that Bengali aunties do. They all kind of grow these pumpkins that they all like to compete about. And I basically did a Pokemon parody where it's like about an auntie that's like trying to grow the best ones and that kind of stuff. And it was really interesting because you know, I think if you're going to get a backlash anywhere, it's always Twitter, right? So I posted it on Twitter, and although there was like a whole group of people that were absolutely loving it, there was a select group that were really kind of like gunning it down. And for me, it's never like negativity. Like obviously you have to have a thick skin for all the stuff you do, but it was really interesting for me to analyze that side of the community, because, you know, I do feel like even when you're doing drag, how do we draw the line within our acts to decide like where we can stand without offending, like because we want to represent you know, women in the right way when we play these characters, right?
Yeah, I think just before we continue, you know, you made some amazing points. One thing about the backlash that you got is people probably recognized you as a male playing a female. With me, people were coming to see Mrs. Kapoor's daughter's wedding going, oh, she was so amazing. You know, where's she from? And then people didn't actually know I was a male.
No way.
Yeah.
No
Literally,
way.
people would call Archana, the director of the show, going, oh, the lady that you've got doing, she's really tall, isn't she? But she's really good. Like, oh, she's amazing. And then they had to like market it in like a bit more of a robust way. Like, no, it's Parle Patel. You've seen his videos on YouTube and whatever.
That's
so
how you know, like, beards are just so common within the South Asian community.
It was such an honor to like actually transform myself that much that people forgot. I was like, wow, like that's what everyone wants. But in terms of like representing females, 100% agree with you. And I feel like for me, what's worked really well is I speak to so many females every day about playing the role, what's right, what's wrong. So I always say that even though, you know, I've written or gave birth to these characters, who shapes them, who gives them direction and like really sharpens their character and makes them a character are all the different women in my life around me who sort of say that, you know, you'd want to do it this way or that way. And what's been really interesting, and I think this is the only sad part for me, is sometimes I will show a character in a bit more of a positive light or show them and portray them in a way that won't damage what it means to be female and that sort of thing. But this is where I've got the backlash. People expect me to do things where I'm derogatory towards females. So they want me to basically turn the character into something that we are laughing at rather than laughing with. And I think that comes down to learning about how to write comedy or how to write in an entertaining way where you are still celebrating the character. For example, I've got Sweetie, and right at the beginning, people thought I was almost, you know, making this character like the butt of all jokes. And then over time, they quickly saw that actually, no, Sweetie in herself is someone who you celebrate and someone who you go to, oh my God, I'm a little bit like her and I'm proud to be like her. The same with Kokila Ben. In the beginning, you know, I had a little bit of backlash because people, it was like video number 3, people didn't know what my aim was and what I was trying to do. But by video number 10 on YouTube, people really understood that I wasn't trying to make someone that we're just laughing at, but I was celebrating that Gujarati matriarch figure that most people know. If you've grown up South Asian, everyone knows a loud and proud snack making Gujarati auntie. So it's about responsibility, I think.
For sure.
There's lots of sources nowadays to educate yourself, and I think just trying to see life through others' perspective is very important. And if so, for me personally, I have a little board. I have a Facebook group with lots of female friends and female who do drag queens, who do drag. And when I'm not sure about something, I just run past it them. And there's been many times that it's like, yeah, maybe that would be a little bit insensitive, maybe not. And I don't even question it. I just, like, I whip it out, like I exclude it from my numbers. And it's just, there's so many, it's rightfully so, it's a very sensitive moment now in society where everyone is like speaking out about all these so important issues. And I think us as an artist, and we have such a responsibility to listen and be current and make sure we read all about it and ask people about it. It's just a continuous, like, it's a learning experience really, and sometimes even de-learning, because we've learned as a society so many things are just put on us, and right now things are changing, and we have to like de-learn everything that we have been programmed with and just start thinking from other people's perspectives. And I think if you're a little bit sensitive and you do that, you're definitely on the right way. And there's always people who is going to be offended by art, and that's also the beauty of art. Like it creates a reaction, and it sparks a reaction in people. But I think it's important that you can like back it up well. And if you fuck up and people come for you, and you do find out that that maybe what you did was inappropriate, it's also a learning experience. You just learn from that, apologize, and move on, being a little bit more responsible and more conscious about what you're doing.
100%. No, and you know, it's really great that you've got a board like That's so great. That's so great. I think I might have to try and set up my own one as well.
I love my lesbians. They keep me in line.
But yeah, Joe, you know, from your perspective as well, you know, it's all about with drag as a form of folk art. It's all about celebrating like the cultural life amongst our community here in the UK, and you know, like what a multicultural society like the UK has developed into, and because of this, you know, like we do have like these you know, micro communities which might have an issue, but then the wider community is not an issue. I just wanted to get your thoughts as well on like how we respectfully draw the lines, but at the same time we still push drag as a folk art form and still broaden perspective.
So I think with regard to looking at drag as a folk art in particular, the communities aspect is really important. And one of the reasons why I would say in particular local drag for me is very much a folk art is because when I think about folk arts, I think about things that are defined by, for example, you making art with what you is around you, and you might not have lots of resources, you might not have a lot of money, but you're creating with whatever resources you have, whatever you've got. And that's very much where drag comes from. I mean, when I think about some of the shows that I saw Choriza do before lockdown, where she was making these incredible, elaborate costumes, and she was at home stoning these things for days, but they looked absolutely stunning. But it was completely homemade, and it was completely. And similarly, there's a thing where in drag, you know, if you're used to old-fashioned drag, you might think that just somebody gets up and just mimes to Shirley Bassey. But what really happens with drag performances is you get a lot of stuff that's cut together. So you get a bit of a song, and so it will be a narrative. It will tell a story. So you get a bit of a song that then has a bit of maybe an advert or like something from YouTube, like a little bit something very kind of memeable that everybody kind of recognizes, and it kind of tells a whole story. And that, I think, is very much folk as well, because it's found sound. It's taking things again that are around you and creating something new out of something that was already there. So I think when we define folk, those are two really important things, but also the sense of community, you know, the sense of people coalescing around a particular art form and celebrating it and being involved in it. And what Choriza was saying about, you know, his community of women that he talks to, you know, it's very much about that. It's about being part of a creative community, which I think is really interesting and exciting. And also, I can't think, as a woman, I can't think of any drag performance I've ever seen that has offended me as a woman. I've never, like, I was in the Mickey ripped out of me. I've always felt like it's something that's celebrating women. And I think that, you know, if you see how many trans women or how many people eventually become trans who start out doing drag, it's definitely a celebration, you know. But it's interesting because, like Choriza did, I saw a show that she did last week in Newcastle, and does a lot of stuff around The Simpsons at the moment. Is like the Simpsons queen right now, and does a lot of Marge Simpson stuff, which is so celebratory of Marge as an empowered woman, and also does stuff about Marge's sisters, particularly, is it Selma who's the lesbian?
Patty.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So doing a whole show about a lesbian Simpsons character. Here's a drag queen doing a show about a lesbian Simpsons character and about her coming out and her, like, you know, and it just, and at the end of it was like, we need to see more drag kings. We need to see more, you know, we need more women, you know, doing this and everything. And so I think it's a very empowered but also empowering community, which is an incredibly important thing. When it comes to marginalized people, that we find strength and power with each other. you know?
Yeah, for sure, because it definitely does feel like that for me as well. Like I think you really hit the nail on the head, and I think it's kind of across the board. Like you take inspiration from everything around you, and for me, that's been my mom, my aunties, and like different scenarios that I've just like kind of come across in day-to-day life. But it's really interesting to see why we don't have more drag kings, for example, like females portraying like males. And you do see it sometimes. Like I have come across some content creators that will, like, for example, dot a beard and like portray like particular things like that. But like, just to get each of your perspectives, like why do you think that is? Because when I try and pinpoint it, I actually don't know.
I think it goes down to representation. I think for us, for me as a white cis man, I've seen myself represented in media so much. So the moment I saw Drag Race, it was very easy for me to connect with it. It was like, oh yeah, that's something for me. Look at those white men dressing up as women. Like, yeah, of course. But women don't get that, sadly. Women don't get that. There's not as much drag king representation or AFAB queens or kings representation out there. So I think it comes down to that, and me and all the queens and the Newcastle community in the Newcastle drag scene and other drag scenes. It's important that we are conscious when we put lineups in cabarets, that we make sure that everyone is represented. So there might be a woman on the audience that might be thinking, oh, I might do drag, and when they see them perform, it's like, okay, so this is for me, I could do that. You know what I mean? I think representation is very, 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 very important and key on this, definitely.
I think it's really interesting to look at the history of women in drag, because this is not new. Women have always done drag, and one of the, going right back to the Victorian period, where there were women portraying men on stage, and that was a very, very common thing within Victorian music hall, right through to women, excuse me, who would do it. There's a pub in Hartlepool that has an old sign up from probably the turn of the 20th century, and it's advertising this woman who dresses as a man and is a barman. So she's like, yeah, she's like this female barman, and she's like working in Hartlepool. And I just freaking love that. The fact that this was it's always been there. We think of drag, because of how it was absorbed into mainstream culture, as being very much about men dressing up as women. And you sometimes now, with people who are less informed, get people saying, but this was always about men dressing in, putting on dresses. It was never about anything else. Well, no, you're wrong. Know your history, because women have always done this. And one of the, everybody always talks about the trans women who were involved in the Stonewall riots and who were the first ones who were right there on the front lines. It's very likely the first person who threw a brick at Stonewall was a drag king, and that's and that's amazing to me. It's been maybe a little bit erased from the history, but it's very important that it doesn't get forgotten, I think.
And what was the because I actually don't know the history behind that particular event. Like, what was the actual situation there?
Okay, so the Stonewall riots were in New York in 1967, 68, and that was the beginning of the gay rights movement. And so what happened was the police were cracking down on gay bars, because it was was it illegal, wasn't it illegal? But they were kind of cracking down on gay bars. And the gay community finally decided that they'd had enough. And so the Stonewall Tavern in the East Village in New York was the scene of, and so that's why you get an organization that represents gay people in the UK called Stonewall. That's where that comes from. It comes from the Stonewall Tavern, yeah. So the Stonewall riots were the beginning of that movement. And there's always argument about who threw the first brick at Stonewall. And there were two trans women who were at the forefront of that movement. But there were lesbians and there were drag kings involved as well, and it's very interesting in terms of the fact that it was about the whole community and the whole kind of spectrum of gay and lesbian people, and not just one particular community.
That's so interesting. I actually didn't know that. But yeah, no, 100%. And yeah, just carrying on with representation as well. Like that's so true, because you know, as human beings, like we always feel more encouraged to freely like pursue something if we do see someone else doing it as well. And that's definitely been something that has been true within my kind of like YouTube space as well. Like when I see Parle, like I get inspired. I'm like, oh man, like, you know, I start buzzing with the ideas like, oh, I could do this scenario, that scenario.
The feelings
well.
mutual, definitely mutual. I was just gonna say that what is interesting actually with drag, I teach folk dance. I teach Gabra, which is a Gujarati folk dance that is hugely popular here in the UK during certain Hindi festivals. It's culturally significant, socially, religiously, artistically, and
because I see that's when you wear the pug, and then you've got like I see. Do you have like a flute sometimes?
We use we have these sticks that we dance with called dandiya. But that is one place where you see a lot of female to male. So like if you have a troupe of 16 dancers, 8 girls will play male dancers. So like that is one space where you see a lot of the whole female becoming male. So it is there. I just feel like we need to push it to the forefront so people can actually celebrate this as, you know, something spectacular rather than it just being something that has been done. So I think just conversations like this, isn't it, is a fantastic way to start, but then just also being responsible and getting these conversations out there.
100%. And I feel like, you know, sometimes it's just really important to know, like, it's all about having fun. Like, it's all about like, we are trying to put like a smile on people's faces, and like, you know, that's the main intention there. I do feel like with my community in particular, like it is kind of like at its inception in some respects, but at the same time it's like it's been around for such a long time, so it always kind of goes back and forth. But it's when you bring religion into it that it's like one of those things where there's more of a kind of argument that kind of goes back and forth, but people don't understand like it is acting, like you are portraying a character, and it is like you're like trying to have fun and entertain people. But it's really interesting to see like you know, us as like all people that are British within the UK, like how, you know, in each of our communities we've like explored this as a cultural art form. And you know, it'll be really interesting to like maybe see a show one day where, you know, you've got like me, you've got Parle, you've got Choriza, you've got all these different types and forms of drag all in one, and how that would kind of meet. And I think, like you said, conversations like this is exactly what I live for, because it really kind of like opens each of our perspectives. Like I felt like I've learned so much from just each and every one of you like today. And it's just like really great to kind of like explore art in that form. Just to kind of wrap up and stuff, like of course, like each of you have had like a very unique experiences in terms of like how you've tried to explore drag. So like, you know, Parle with Mrs. Kapoor's wedding, and you know, Choriza, like, you know, recently with RuPaul's Drag Race as well. What is it like being amongst like other people? I don't want to say competition, but it's like it's healthy competition, but like just talk me through each of your experiences and what it was like to do each of your productions.
I'll go first because I won't be long. Yeah, do you know what, I've never, with the whole competition thing, I've always felt that each character has their own nuance, own story to tell. And I think at the beginning when I started YouTube, people would often compare me. They would often be like, oh, well, we've already got like Lily Singh, you know, Superwoman, she does an Indian mom, so why do we now need another one? So then the argument was like, oh, well, Parle is the Gujarati version. But then people quickly understood that actually Lily's and Parle's style, you know, comedy technique is so different. Like, yeah, we're so similar, and we're both South Asian, but there's like 1.2 billion more, isn't there? There's
Yeah,
something like,
yeah, for real.
it's
But
an ever-growing number, and I'm like, I'm a little bit confused how we can turn the TV on and watch about 20 different comedy shows where there's a white mum being portrayed, yet if there's 5 South Asians doing mothers on the internet, then all of a sudden that no, there isn't space. I've never understood that, especially because within the South Asian culture, there's just so much diversity. There's so many languages, like religiously, there's like 4 or 5 dominant religions just within South Asia. Language-wise, there's about 22 official languages in India alone, right? So it just makes you think that actually, really, we need more. We need way more. If there's that many languages and that many subcultures, then there's so many more stories waiting to be told. So I'm sort of like, no, I want to see more of it. And like you said, when I see your stuff, I'm literally buzzing and like cheerleading as best that I can. I'm like, yes, I want to see more. Has he uploaded more? Refresh, scroll down. So yeah, like competition, yeah, of course we have to compete. It's healthy, but it's not definitive of what we do. It's not, the entire thing is not a competition. And that's important to remember.
Well, I think in every drag scene, in every different city, it is very competitive, to be honest. There's few bars, few gigs, few cabarets, and you want to be part on all of them. And there's very, very, very few people that manage to make the step to do drag full time, sadly. But I think something that is important to understand, and something that I understood very early when I started my drag career, is like, you don't have to wait for someone to call you to do a show. If no one's calling you, you go ahead and put on your own cabaret. You know what I mean? And that's very important. And I really like both of you. You create your niche, and you have your platform, and you're just putting it up to the world. And I wish there was a little bit more of that in the drag scene. I think the drag scene like could learn a lot from both of you. You do your thing and then put it up to the world, and it just keep working. And first and foremost, do drag or do an art form that you enjoy yourself. Don't do it to compete against others, because if you do that, if you create your own path, you're gonna go a lot faster than if you try to follow someone else's. And that's worked for me very well, and that's definitely something that's still missing sometimes on Newcastle drag scene, and I think in others.
Yeah, I definitely think like with if we're talking about like the Bangladeshi art in particular with Jatra, with how that's developed is really interesting, because in the early, like I remember my mom and even my uncle, like for example, he used to do like drag, like, and he used to portray like all kinds of characters like politicians and stuff like that. And Jatra was this kind of art form within the villages for people to be able to like bring to light, like just like you did, Choriza, like with the Brexit situation, things that people feel very passionately about, and how for them to be able to display that. But the unfortunate thing is with the Jatra scene, like in Bangladesh, like it's kind of developed kind of into more of a almost like cabaret kind of style, like where it's not so much about like the actual storytelling so much anymore. And in the UK, for example, like Jatra is like non-existent really. And one thing that we're kind of thinking of doing like at the Bangla Folk program is kind of maybe putting together like a Jatra show, kind of like Mrs. Kapoor's Wedding or like something like that, where we really are able to,
it'll be amazing,
break that barrier and like finally like bring it back down to those core roots of like what it used to be like back in the 1970s, and the same kind of like folk music, because even music, like it is such a big part of like folk art, right? Like even in the UK. But yeah, 100%. Hopefully, wish us luck. We're gonna definitely try and put that together. But guys, look, just any closing thoughts on the conversation, anything you'd like to say before I wrap up?
In my baby-sized 10-year career of doing all this creative stuff I do, this has to be the most original conversation I have ever had. I've never ever had anyone approach me for something so, one, needed, and two, just so refreshing. I was like, wow, what a conversation that I'm gonna get to have on a Friday. And I mean that genuinely. Usually it's about how have you been oppressed or just something really typical, but this was really original. And it just goes to show that if given the opportunity, there's a lot we can say about topics like this. So thank you so much for having me. And I can't wait to see all of your guys' work. Honestly, I'm like taking notes in my head. I'm like, I'm going to stalk all of these people. I'm going to literally go to their events and be like, hey, we did a podcast. Honestly, I love connecting to things like this. So thank you.
Likewise, man. Likewise. It's just so great to have like an open, organic conversation. Jody.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. It's really, really interesting. It's interesting to talk to people about drag who are coming from a completely different perspective, not necessarily that like down the line queer perspective that you get so much of the time in drag, you know, and also to be perfectly honest, the, you know, that sort of Asian perspective, because I don't know an awful lot of Asian drag queens. So that's also something that's very interesting, is bringing it, you know, bringing that to the table and kind of, you know, looking at it through that lens. So thank you for the opportunity. It's been lovely.
No, thank you so much for your contribution to the conversation as well. And no, I'm really glad you were able to kind of see our perspective as well. Last but not least, Choriza.
I just think the conversations like these just take the weight off how serious some people take it. It's not that serious. We're just having fun creating art. And I think sometimes people who are from the outside of the drag world have maybe a more strong definition of what drag is than we as performers. And it's nice to have, for people to be able to listen to us have such a relaxed conversation about our different perspectives. It's been very, very refreshing. So thank you for inviting me too.
No, thank you so much once again. But guys, thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in to the Bangla Folk podcast. If you guys want to see even more episodes of this podcast, be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and keep updated with our socials at Bangla Folk program. So yeah, thank you all so much again, and we will catch you all really, really soon.